Welcome to The Secret Life of Mothers. My name is Maggie Gordon-Walker, and I'm the founder and director of Mothers Uncovered. Join us as we explore and share the incredible stories of mothers when life has thrown at them challenge and, in some cases, trauma. Discover how the skills we learn in matrescence, which means becoming a mother, can teach us about more than motherhood. They teach us also about unconditional love, resilience, and acceptance. I'm joined today by Ellie Hatto. Ellie is married. She's a mum to two boys aged 10 and 6. She started her working life as a bookbinder before moving into estates and construction management, and more recently became CEO of a renewable energy solutions company. She also works in the field of suicide bereavement support and prevention. When she's not working, her favourite things to do are swimming, running attached to her dog, listening to self-help books, singing in her local choir, and watching comedy. She was lucky to do a round-the-world grown-up gap year when she was 35 for 6 months, where all her fellow travellers called her mum, which 2 years later became the reality. Ellie, please would you self-identify for our listeners?
Hi, Maggie. Great to be with you today. Yes, I am a white woman. I was born in Bristol, born and raised there for 37 years, and then now live in Hampshire.
Thank you. So Ellie's joined us today to tell her story, not only of becoming a mother, but also her experiences of growing up without her own mother, who died when she was young. She also will talk to us about the organisation she founded, Beside Yourself. This was founded fairly recently, but grew out of the experience of losing her father to suicide 10 years ago when she was a new mother. She will talk about the details of her father's death. So if this is something you might find triggering, please take care of yourself during this listen. So Ellie, great to have you here. Let's start by asking, what would we need to know about you and your background to understand how you would describe yourself as a mother?
Well, I've always kind of described myself as a bit of a reluctant mother in some ways. Having children didn't necessarily come easily for me. I had them slightly later. And in terms of my upbringing, I was raised by my dad from as you said, my mum died. She was I was 4 actually when she died. So yeah, I mean, in terms of very free flow, I guess, attitude towards motherhood, raised by a man, so didn't necessarily have massive woman or female input from a mum. So yeah, I think it's something I've just got rolled with the punches with, really. Came as a bit of a shock being a mum. I think it does for many people, but just kind of got on with it, really.
Certainly does come as a shock. No one quite prepares you. So yeah, let's dwell a little bit more on your past. As you say, it was just you and your dad and your sister. And as you were only 4, you have very few memories of your mother before she died. So perhaps you could explore with us the impact of her death, how you imagine the death was on you, not just on you though, but maybe your sister and the rest of your family.
Well, I think it's an interesting one because I was so young. I have snippets of memories of my mum, but again, I don't know if they are real or they're kind of from photographs that I have and that kind of thing. So it's a kind of strange one that I've clearly knew that mothers were a thing, but again, for me, a lot of people say to me, you know, oh, it must be really weird being a mum, for example, or not having a mum. And for me, it's just all I've ever known, really. But sometimes I still think, oh, have I not got a mum? It kind of comes as a shock, which is strange. 44 years later, I think it had a massive impact on my dad. I remember him telling us that my mum had died. Well, at least I think it was a real memory, and we were huddled in the lounge. Me, my sister, and my dad, and he was crying. The only time I ever saw him cry, and told us that she died. But she did. She was terminally ill for a year and died of bowel cancer. So it must have been a very traumatic and awful thing for him to go through, only to then lose her and be left, if you like, to bring up two girls on his own, basically, with very much little in the way of other support. He had 2 sisters, but we saw one every Sunday. But again, it was quite limited in terms of support. My sister was slightly older, a couple of years older. I guess she has more memories on it. We don't really talk about it that much, but I'm imagining she has, more clear memories of things that they used to do together and that kind of thing. But I think it was very difficult and did, have massive impacts on my dad. Though he didn't ever present in that way. It seemed like he was more than happy to bring up two children on his own. Maybe that's a child thing whereby you think, oh, they're absolutely overjoyed to be looking after me and picking me up from brownies and doing all this. In reality, he probably wasn't. And later in life, he may have alluded to that, which I guess is quite shocking at the time, but actually the reality, because as we know, as being a parent, it's not all plain sailing and far from it.
Mm. Yeah, that must have been, as you say, a very tough time. I'm interested to know, you mentioned how the impact from your aunts was quite limited. Are there any particular memories that you have of any input they had around you when you were growing up?
Not really. It was more a case of we go there every Sunday and have sort of Sunday lunch, and that was it. But it wasn't that kind of it wasn't that sort of almost replacement mother kind of thing. Not that I was looking for that, but again, as I said, I didn't have anything to gauge it by in some ways. But it was kind of supportive, and we'd go on holiday and things like that. But in terms of emotionally, it wasn't. We weren't a particularly open and aren't a particularly open and expressive in a way family. So it wasn't. How were you doing at school, darling? And all the. It was very surface level, but we felt, I guess, well, I certainly felt cared for and loved, but not in a classic huggy, kissy, well done, darling kind of way. So that's just my experience, I guess. And people are different. They were quite old. My dad had me when he was 45. He was of the older sort of generation, and I guess he may have thought that that's women do that kind of stuff, and as my mum wasn't around, that he would he had to step into that, but did the minimum, I guess, to get by, if you like.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a sole parent myself, so I wonder if my boys have yearned perhaps for advice from older males in their lives. So your father adopted more of a dual role, you say, but perhaps less the touchy feely side, more the practical
stuff. And he was.
No, carry on.
He was, sorry, he was a carpenter by trade, very kind of a physical sort of person. He liked dancing, he liked golf, all those kinds of things. He built our not conservatory, what's the word? I can't think of the word. An extension. That's patio. It. He did everything, and he had plans. But interestingly, you say about the took on the dual role. He did embrace. I imagine before my mum died, he didn't do things like cooking. He had a classic kind of male sort of manual worker, if you like, role. And my mum, I knew she worked in a local hospital on nights and that kind of thing, which again was starting to gain traction in the 70s, I guess, and not all women worked, but he did in fact embrace things like, I always remember he took a course in using a sewing machine, for example, which I thought was interesting, because he would say that he was with a bunch of women, but I think he quite enjoyed women's company, and he cooked. He was fine. He didn't he wasn't off the scale with his cooking prowess, but we were all fed. It wasn't, he could do it because, hey, you do it if you have to, don't you? That's clearly what what happened. But I think in terms of the dual, I think what I kind of did lack is that kind of the woman's approach to things that happen to women, puberty. I remember the dreaded period talk at school, and
I was wondering how that
absolutely. And I can feel it now, ridiculously, absolute almost panic of, oh my God, this. It was almost because we never spoke about it, and with my sister I didn't either. It was like an embarrassing, very shameful thing that I can now as an adult apply to how I felt then. It was like, oh, I don't want to go, and my dad said, you don't need to go to that because your sister can tell you all about that. And she didn't want to at the end of the day. I think I found out about all that in a tent on brownie camp or guide camp, I think, once, if I remember. But again, it was all normal then, and it's just your life, isn't it? But I think that was a missing piece in some ways, looking back, that I didn't see life as a woman as puberty means that you can then have children and you may get have a partner, and I didn't see it as progressive. And I've kind of renamed myself Petra Pan because I have that kind of constant, almost never quite grown up. Though in saying that, you don't hit a point at 18 and suddenly go, yes, I'm an adult and I have all the answers, do we? Well, I hope I'm not the only one who feels like that. But so I think in some ways, in summary, that I guess I noticed that I didn't have that woman's perspective and interaction. I had it with other friends' mums and things, but again, it's not the same when it's, they had that inner knowledge that I wasn't party to, I think. So I do notice that now more so.
I think it's probably fairly common. So that would have been the 80s when this was happening to you. Things weren't talked about in quite that way.
No.
I can totally identify. I often stop and think, "Oh my God, I'm their mum." When did that happen?
Yes.
I don't think there's part of everyone that just feels like you're just stumbling. I remember thinking my parents knew everything, but they probably didn't. They were probably just stumbling around, worried about this.
Well, hopefully we all are.
So yeah, with your father, when you started dating, then that was he overly protective? Would you say he was kind of about on a par with other?
He had no real comments. I just carried on, and I got interested in boys, as people do, or whoever they're interested in. And it wasn't so, something I would announce to my dad and so, oh, by the way, Dad, I'm now seeing blah blah. It was all quite sort of under wraps. I mean, the only comments he would ever make were when I was in, I guess, not the best relationships, and he would sort of say, "Oh, they're not doing this, or they're not taking money off you, or they're not." But it was all very negative things. It wasn't anything. Oh, how's it going? I hope it's going well, which I saw as a bit of a sort of that he wasn't interested. And I guess from his point of view, as you pointed out, that he was probably looking out for me and my sister, but it didn't come across that way. It came almost accusatory of, oh, you're not kind of almost letting them do this, are you? And it's like, oh, well, and actually on one occasion it was true. One of my boyfriends was, I want to say, taking money off me. I was lending him money that, he was getting himself, many of us have been there. It wasn't a massive deal, but to my dad, it was like, oh, this is a red flag. But he wouldn't talk about it in that way. And I would then internalize it and take it on that, oh dear, I'm terrible if because I've lent them some money and not got it back. So just one example, but yeah, it didn't seem very progressive in terms of me growing up. It felt like, everyone getting married and doing other things. It felt that I wasn't part of that team that would do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It didn't seem natural at all. Though my body was naturally wanting to explore and do things everyone wants to do when they grow up and start looking, romantic relationships or whatever. It's it was a bit stunted, I guess, for me, and probably still is.
So yeah, let's move us on a few years. So you became a mother yourself, and you said that wasn't something you'd particularly occur to you, but you did. And how would your father respond when? So had your sister had children or
no,
not?
she hasn't. No, she's never had children. No,
Okay,
so she's a couple of years older. Yeah, and moved out of home a couple of years before me. So we both lived at home till we were quite old. And again, another thing is that people would say, why haven't you moved out? Or why, they're all buying houses. And, it was the 80s when, people could get mortgages on their own relatively cheaply, which sadly I didn't. And it was a case of, why don't you leave? Why? And I was like, well, I didn't know what to say. I was quite, I guess, offended by that. Now I would have said, the older me say, well, I didn't want to. I didn't have anyone to move out with. I didn't have the wherewithal to get a cheap mortgage that all my friends were doing. And we just stayed. We were quite a unit. I mean, we were almost more like friends in some ways than, we go out to the pub together, and I was quite similar, I think, in personality to my dad. So we always got on. He was never that overbearing, you got to be in at 9 o'clock. He let us, let's say, run wild. Sadly, I didn't run wild. I wish I had now, but but it was very free flow. I think there was that inner respect that he was on his own that was never spoken about. It was that thing that we don't want to be we could have gone off the rails with what happened, but we there was that inner respect. I like to think it was about respect. Maybe it wasn't, but yeah.
It does seem, yeah, like you were more like just housemates. It wasn't like he had his wife, so therefore you've got to
No,
leave the nest to
no.
allow them that
And
you were
we
just
didn't see,
carrying on.
yeah, we didn't see
Yeah.
that kind of progression of we got to, got to get married, you got to do this. We didn't see, well, I certainly didn't. I can't speak for my sister, but we didn't see that as the next step in life, if that makes sense.
So how was he with your son? Obviously, we'll talk
Well,
about
he met him
ganisation.
only a few times. He wasn't that interested. I mean, he was starting to decline in his health at that point anyway. So I think he was kind of on a bit of a different planet, if you like, of his mental state. So he as I said, I came to motherhood, I guess, at the time relatively late compared to certain people, my peers and things. But he found out that I was pregnant by opening a letter from the doctor, I think it was at the time, and phoned me at work and saying he'd opened a letter by mistake, which he'd never done before, which was slightly odd, and saying, "Oh, I've opened this letter and it says that it's confirming your pregnancy." And he said, and the first thing he said was, "What are you going to do about that?" It's a big open plan office. I was like, well, what do you mean? He presumably he was suggesting that it wasn't something that was welcome, because he didn't know that that was what I was doing. I wasn't the father of my 10-year-old. Wasn't we were together, but not in a classic married and set up sense, which I guess my dad would have seen as the ultimate thing and the environment to start having children in. He would have seen that as very crazy and a very rash and silly decision on my part. So that's why I think why his reaction was like that. So this is a misconception. I think lots of people assume that all parents are absolutely over the moon about they tell them that they're pregnant and they're, "Oh wow, darling," So that's just my experience of it, really. That's just a reflection of him in general.
Interesting that was the one letter he chose to open.
Very
so
odd.
presumably it had a sort of crest or something on it, and there was something in it that thought,
well, I
"What's
don't
this
know.
about my daughter?"
It may
It's
have
kind
been
of
the
interesting.
initial. It may have just been the initial, and he just probably wasn't thinking. But it's very odd that the one thing almost you don't want someone to open in some ways is that. But yeah, no, he didn't have. I don't think he had a secret habit of opening my mail without me knowing. No.
Who knows?
Who knows?
Anyway, so Ellie, we'll now move to the more difficult part. So your father, maybe ask his name?
Is Alan? Alan, yes.
Alan.
Alan.
So Alan took his life 10 years ago when he was 82. So your eldest son was only 4 months old. So if you're okay with it, if you could just take us through the events of his death.
Yeah, so I mean, as I said, he was starting to, he hit 80 and he started to sort of physically and then latterly decline mentally. And I'd moved out, just literally 6 weeks before my first child was born, hence the Petra Pound thing, literally 6 weeks before. And he, I think in his mind, kind of considered that me and my sister was also married and, as I said, moved out some years previous, that we were kind of okay. And I think he did, I mean, decades ago, he used to joke about suicide. Well, he didn't call it suicide, but clearly he'd say, if things ever got if things ever get too bad, Ellie, I'll just take the pills. And we're like, oh, haha. He was quite a funny kind of jovial sort of sarcastic person, probably a bit like me. And we're like, oh yeah, Dad, whatever, and it's like, reality was, I think, that the trauma of losing my mum was clearly, we didn't see it or refused to see it or whatever, but it had I think it had a major impact. And he did the only time he really opened up was just towards when he was dying, that things were really bad, and he'd say things like he just functioned through life and he was always been depressed. Again, we never saw that. I never saw that as something he was displaying as such, but he probably was, and he was doing a very good job of either hiding it or sparing us from it, which was amazing and honorable. And I can't believe someone could do that. Either that or we just weren't looking for the right things. But he was also being looked at for possible Parkinson's. His walking had got, his gait had got, he was starting to shuffle, and his arm, he was holding one arm in a kind of a limp kind of way. So I think he was hiding a lot of issues. But yeah, so I'd moved out, and I went to the house, and I'd visit every week or so. I was getting really quite worried about him by this stage, really, pretty on my mind a lot, because I knew things weren't looking good at all. And I think the fact that we'd all moved out, it was a case of he knew things wouldn't improve. And I went to the house, that hot July day in 2013, and I was the one to find him, that he'd taken his own life. So it's a very odd, I remember it absolutely vividly, every moment of that. I had my little 4-month-old in a car seat, and I put him on the kitchen table and scoured the house for him, and sadly made the discovery I half thought I might make when I entered the house, because things were just not kind of right. But yeah, so it was a tricky time for.
Was he in the house?
He was in the house, in the surroundings of the house, if you like. So yeah, but yeah, so he was and again thrown into a world of unknown, absolute shock and terrible trauma and absolute sadness, because he was. I mean, he was and is always been the most important person in my life, really, because he was everything. It was all my parent roll into one. And I know people, there was more of an emphasis on knowing that my mum was gone, and that I did have a mum. But I think that compounded as well, the kind of reopened the loss that I have, I guess, experienced quite a lot of loss, which I've got used to, but it kind of reopened that. And I was I felt like an orphan. Yes, I was 37, but hey, we don't suddenly turn into a lovely, wonderful, functioning adult at 18. I was still his child, and I felt like he was then gone. It was terrible. It was awful, and still is.
It must have been, yeah. That I'm trying to imagine you there that day with your new life there.
Yeah.
Was a male, and then as you say, the most significant male in your life
absolutely
was gone.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm wondering if, as you would say, obviously the pain of losing his wife, your mother, must have stayed with him. Perhaps there was part of him who thought, well, Ellie's, there's now a new life. Yeah. I don't need to be here. I mean, did he leave a note? Was there any kind of sense?
No, it was no note. It wasn't his style. I mean, he, as a not very expressive person, the last thing I thought, I mean, I think the notes thing is maybe a bit in the movies, it's the kind of almost a romantic side of, telling how much they love you, and but no, it wasn't his style. And again, the police came and asked, just scoured the house for a note, but he did. I mean, much as it was and still is a massive shock, that what he did and what he felt he needed to do in order to, I guess, end the pain that he was in, the fact that his life wasn't going to improve. It was just something he, as a practical person, thought, well, this is what I need to do. We need to talk about being a bird and all the other things. And now the work I do, in which we'll talk about in a minute, about suicide, is that the many things that he said, and had I have known what the things I know now, I would have certainly flagged up. And if someone ever said that to me, I would certainly be thinking, hang on, this is, this could be leading down a path that we don't necessarily want to go down. So yes.
So yes, you mentioned your work. So yes, tell us about Beside Yourself.
Yes,
your aims for it, your work as an advocate, and
yes,
so it came about fairly soon after your father took his life.
It did. I mean, it kind of Beside Yourself. So we're a community interest company, very very young. We started last winter, and the aim is to represent and support those the experience of life after suicide. So when my dad died, I was literally spent the night ferociously Googling what is suicide about. What, this has never happened to me. I don't know anyone directly this has happened to, but so I was thrown into a different world. So the best support that I got was through a national charity, a peer support charity, and I started going about a year or so. They set up in where I live down in Hampshire, and I started going there every month for a peer-to-peer support group, and I literally haven't stopped going since. So that kind of formed the basis, if you like, the sort of the 10 years or so years that I've spent being supported. I then became a facilitator for that group, and I'm still doing that now. It's just something I do. So I interact with lots of people and hopefully support them, because we're all walking the same path, and we have all different experiences of suicide, bereavement, and impact. But again, there's so many common themes that you don't get the funny looks or the judgments, because nothing is out of bounds. It's a safe place to talk about it. So that's where the kind of the origins of Beside Yourself, if you like, have come about. And I've just been drawn to work in that field, because it just feels very to use a bit of a cliche, very authentic, and it's really purposeful. And I really enjoy it. And people say, how can you enjoy? Oh, that must be so difficult working in that area. And actually, I don't find it difficult. Sometimes it's difficult, and I don't fear the emotions that sometimes I could sit in a group and just cry for the whole night, and the next time, everything's fine and we're laughing and joking and everything else. But that's what I get from it. So I mean, the work that we do is developing and creating sort of content about real life after suicide. And that's my interest area because it's happened to me. I like that really open and honest perspective about real life. What's it like, the experience, finding love after suicide, or going on your first holiday, things like that. It's just those real life things, and making it a bit, dare I say, lighthearted, because that's kind of my personality, and trying to inject some of that into it. But yeah, so we create varied content, blogs, and we do there's a lot of issues around for bereaved people that services designed to support them aren't necessarily that brilliant, or their experiences. So I'm, as you said, an advocate for that, and we're just growing on that. Peer support is an area that we're looking to look at as well, and perhaps suicide impact sort of awareness training for organizations, that kind of thing. So we're just growing and gaining sort of traction, as the time goes by. So yeah, it's really great to be to set it up and feel like it's something as an extension of me, and hopefully other people will also find that approach helpful and appealing and supportive, really.
Right. So yeah, on this podcast, we talk about the concept of post-traumatic growth as opposed to stress. So obviously you had that massive life-changing situation. So I was wondering how you think this has changed you, and perhaps how you became a mother to your children with the knowledge of this loss and carrying that within you, and how it's helped you grow as a person.
Yeah, I think living without a mum, it's made me just get on with it, really, because no one else can really. You have to, if you've got your own children, the buck stops with you. You are that responsible person. I think it's given me that kind of, easy going. It's not quite the word, but just going with what things are thrown up, really, because no one can really tell you what, and that's made me quite, I guess, independent, probably too independent in some ways. So just getting on with it, really.
Do you talk to your sons much about your dad?
I'm again, my approach to things is despite being quite a closed emotionally sort of family, I'm kind of the opposite, that I do talk about my dad's suicide to certainly the eldest, the 10-year-old. I don't believe in keeping things under wraps or making being not I'm quite truthful without in an age appropriate way. I don't talk about heaven, and that's just my belief system, really, or lack of. I kind of tell it like it is. That's just my way, really. But yeah, I don't believe in the whole, and I see why people do that, and it depends on different families. But I think it's the open approach is the best one, and it works for me and hopefully for them.
Yes. I mean, I would imagine if you go through a loss, you gain a sort of bigger appreciation of the importance of life and
Yeah,
seizing opportunities and living in the moment
in
because
many
things
ways, yeah, in
change.
some ways, I guess that loss is sort of a bit of a dark cloud, but it has,
Mm.
yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if if those things almost hadn't have happened. And I see that as hopefully helpful for other people as well. But yeah, I don't look at it as having not being brought up with a mum. I don't see that as a barrier or any major issue in my life. I think it's probably made me say another cliche, but quite strong in that. And people say to me, "Oh, you're really strong," and you don't necessarily think that of yourself, do you? But it's interesting when other people say, because of this, that, and then you're still doing this. You're seen as strong, and I guess that's not a bad thing, is it?
No, no. I mean, I think as well, like you, I run a small organization, and it's a continual battle to keep it
Mm.
going
Yeah,
and to keep it moving forward and to secure funding. So you
yeah,
resilient. You have to have a
yeah,
certain level of resilience because you get knockbacks all the time,
yeah,
and you have to sort of
yeah,
keep going because it's important. You do your
yeah,
work because it's important to you, and the same I do with Mothers Uncovered. But just in general, this sort of sense that it's important for mothers to
yeah.
share their stories like you are now.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So, all out of all the turmoil of losing first your mum and then your
Yeah.
dad, and then becoming a mum yourself. Can you think of the sort of unexpected moments of either from aspects of your past or from when you became a mother yourself? Any unexpected things that happened or unexpected things that you felt?
Well, I just being a mum and being able to just do it. I think even that sounds like either a very big thing or a small thing. That it was quite alien to me, the whole thing of having a child, because it wasn't something, I didn't have cousins growing up. I had a sister, but it was all, they weren't. I didn't interact with children. I'd never. I mean, I always thought this was a something to celebrate. I'd never changed a nappy before I had my own child. And I
Nor
don't
me.
know why I say
I
that to
put
you.
it on. I put it on upside down or back to
Yeah.
front. I remember in the
But
hospital thinking, "What?"
yeah, but there was no other children that I ever interacted with that
Mm.
I would, and friends didn't, it just didn't, I guess they maybe didn't trust me to do it. But no, I think the fact that I actually had a baby at all was quite miraculous given the kind of background and, not seeing it as necessarily the thing to do. So I think, yeah, I think it was, and just going for it. I was always very adamant about breastfeeding, not for just because because it was, I considered it easier, and I thought, why would I'm going to say it's everyone's choice, but that was, I didn't do it for any kind of moral reasons. It was a case of, but this got to be easier, right? You've got all this stuff here. If it works for you, then keep going, and that's kind of my philosophy of just keep on going, really.
Yeah. Yes, yeah, maybe if you've lost someone close to you, as your mum was to cancer, you say, so you're kind
Yes,
of
yeah,
aware of the capabilities of your body and wanting to honor that in the
yeah,
best
I
way you
guess
can.
so.
I don't know, it's just
I
something that's
guess
just
so. Yeah,
occurred
it
to me.
could be.
So yeah, did you find motherhood, was it easy for you? Did you struggle with depression in any way? Did you?
I mean, I found, when I say easy, and I always describe it as being hit by a train. Um, because I think it's probably the same for everyone. It's just one day you go from being not pregnant, then you're pregnant, and you kind of get used to being pregnant. It's funny. I always had this thing in some ways that I enjoyed the pregnant bit, but I almost didn't realize that yes, it will come out, and then you're a parent again. It sounds silly, but I was quite happy being pregnant. It was almost like it could have been never-ending pregnancy. It'd be great. And then it comes out and you're suddenly not, again, you're not pregnant anymore, which is quite a shock. You go to have this belly, and then you've got the baby, it was all my husband always laughs at me that when my son was born, and it was in the early hours in the hospital, I basically, he went off to sleep, the baby, because I'd had some pethidine, and I think that had transferred through to him. So he slept weirdly very, very well, and so did I. And I put my earplugs in, put my eye mask on the night that he was born, and said, right, okay, great, the baby's in next to me in the cot, right, bedtime. And was sadly rudely awakened, some hours later, still in the pitch dark, that they don't sleep. Sounds ridiculous. They don't sleep normal hours, and then hence the breastfeeding. That was just, I mean, anytime, every hour, whatever. And again, but I just went for it. Just went, got through it. So I think the my first labor was so painful. I always say that if someone, and this is absolutely honest, that if someone would have cut an arm off at the same time, I wouldn't have noticed that being any more painful. And I stand by that. And people say, oh, you can't. And I was one of these people that thought, people with morning sickness were, come on, what are you worried about? I had really bad morning sickness with my first one, and for a couple of months I just felt sick all the time and was sick. But the labor thing is there's a lot of things about birth plans, and oh, I'm going to have this birth. It's kind of not worth the paper it's written on, but that's for another day. But the second one was kind of easier, and I guess I'd got used to being a parent. The initial shock of being a parent was overcome with the first one, but the second one, I actually forgot how to breastfeed. I was showing every health professional going, is this right? And I guess they latch and things in different ways, don't they? I guess. And it was like, is this right? And it's like, you've done this. How can you not? The most natural thing, so say, in the world, and suddenly I've forgotten, but it came back. It all came back. But I found it a big shock. But not. I just went for it. I went to baby groups, I think, within the first week, because I'm quite sociable, and I found them a massive lifeline. And obviously the work you're doing is brilliant. That it's not, people assume it's about the baby. It's actually about the parent and the mum. Many people I spoke to were going through similar, what has just happened? We've got a baby, and wow, all the stuff that goes with it. It's a major deal.
I think though it's important that women tell their stories of their matrescence, which, as you know,
absolutely
means
a new word that you've helped me learn.
And it's a good word, because
yes,
I remember the first time I went out without my baby, literally just to go down the road, and it's just like, but no one looking at me will know that I was pregnant and have a baby. I just, obviously my tummy was still a bit, but I look normal. It's just like, but I don't feel normal.
No.
But so you can talk about your first birth. There's always space for that. So it was more painful than you. So you feel quite strongly about the role of the mother within that and not being listened to. Would you say?
I think so. I think it stems back, isn't it, that you're given a fill in your birthing plan, and you think it's sort of like filling in, like a menu, or what you'd like, on your breakfast. Would you like toast? Would you like orange juice? I mean, as though it's all going to, and I get the thing that people, there's that almost a generational thing of, don't talk about labor, because if you tell anyone how painful it is, everyone's going to stop having babies. And it's like, well, yes, but there's a fine line between complete naivety and ignorance and then going into it and being, it's like, what the heck is this about? This is yes, I'm not saying it was a breeze, and I consider myself a high pain threshold, but the first experience was, as I said, was just off the scale. It felt like, another way of looking at it was that it was like, because I think you're not used to, having things, I had a vaginal birth, and you're not used to having things coming out of there. I mean, it may sound ridiculous, but to me at the time, and again, absolutely honest, that it felt like it was almost like having a baby out of your arm or something. It didn't feel like, even though it's natural, but if you've never done it before, it feels unnatural, and well, it felt unnatural for me. It didn't feel, it didn't. It was like, it's like you're trying to get something out of somewhere. That's, yeah, anyway, I won't go into too much detail. It didn't feel like that to me. So I felt
No.
quite out of control of, well, how can I get this thing out? I don't kind of get it, because and no one was telling me anything different. No one gave me any, because you're going through it yourself, aren't you, at the end of the day? But I guess the birthing plan is, I'd like to do this. I want it totally natural. I want to do, but it totally depends on where the baby's, I think mine was against my spine or something, because something was seriously mega painful for me. But, I guess labours are painful, but there needs to be a fine line, I think, between informing mothers about the reality of labour and what can actually, but not putting them off that the humans come to a grinding halt because no one wants to go through that experience. So yeah, it did annoy me quite a lot at the time, and clearly still does.
I think there's something in that, but you want to empower women to be able to birth in the way they want. I do suspect they just think, oh yeah, they've written that down, we'll chuck that out to the window.
Well, I think, if it's not meaningful, then kind of let's review it. Really, why do it?
It is one of my bugbears that women give birth in hospital if they don't have health conditions or unwell. But people do it because they think, oh, because I might need medical assistance.
Well, yeah.
But as soon as you take someone out of a familiar environment and put them into a harsh, sterile world of a hospital where people are ill, and then that's more likely to happen. I feel really strongly that there should be proper birthing centres built right next to hospitals,
exactly.
so that you are there should you need an anaesthetist or a doctor, but a kind of more home environment. I just think it would have a much more beneficial effect.
I mean,
people go, it costs money, but it's just like, well, what about the impact?
Exactly.
It causes for women through trauma of birth, the impact on babies, things like a friend of mine works in primitive retained reflexes. There's lots of things that stem from a bad birth, and actually you would save money in the end and have people.
I mean, my experience of that actually with my second was that I was 42 when I had my second, and I was induced on my due date, and there was an element of, well, they were saying, because of your age, we don't want to take any risks, and you'll basically be induced, when it's difficult, isn't it? Because you think if something went wrong, you carried on and naturally waited until that they decided to make an appearance, the baby. You think, well, there's that element of, is it a case by case? Should it be judged case by case if you're an otherwise healthy person? I don't know. I'm not an expert, but it does make you think that you don't really have much control over letting it happen sort of naturally. So I think that's another example of what you were just saying about the choice and the experiences. They're major experiences. With my second, I then became I was then looking at birthing what's it called, the techniques of the breathing and stuff, and try to own my own labor, because it felt like the first one, it was a medical, almost a procedure that happened to me, as opposed to me owning it, because I didn't know what to expect. With the second, I had the experience of the first one, so I knew that I thought, actually, I want to do it differently. But I think women should be able to do it the way they want to do it on the first one, dare I say, and maybe the last. Big Definitely. Challenges there, I would agree. Yeah.
So your son was born in March 2013. So the day before he was born, if you were to write a letter to yourself, what bits of advice would you give to yourself in it?
I would say that try to not lose sight of who you are, what your identity is, even if you don't really know who that person is. It's very common, easy, and I guess natural to give everything into I think, especially as a woman, if you are, you're with that child all the time, you might be breastfeeding, you feel like you've lost a limb if they're not in your sight, and that's, people joke about that and think, oh, it's an instinctive thing, isn't it? It's where are they? It's so I think try to maybe not in the early stages, but try to get back to some kind of, doing things that you previously enjoyed, or new things that you might enjoy, time out doing sports or whatever, or interacting with other people, and yeah, to try to maintain a sense of self, though it's not always easy, and I haven't really done that brilliantly, and it's hard with young children. Yeah, so I think that's the main thing I would say, because it is it was for me quite a major shock, and I can't be the only one that being a mum
No,
is
no.
suddenly a big life change, and one you kind of
That's
not as in control with.
yeah.
And the other thing is that don't try not to get to any people, I guess, without children. Sometimes they just query, well, why can't you get to that appointment for 9 o'clock? Why can't? Because in the early stages, timings are just, as you would know, don't sweat over the timings thing, because it takes probably an hour to get out of the house with all the things you need to pack, and have you forgotten this, have you got that, oh,
At
change of
least an
clothes,
hour.
so yeah, I think but it's a great experience. It's given me a lot of purpose, and just, I guess, help to kind of ease the losses that I have felt in some ways, not to replace anything, but just new life, which to me is something I never thought that I would, I guess, achieve. So it's yeah.
That's lovely to hear. And I'm staggered that you got to groups in the first week. I remember thinking, there was a group in the afternoon, literally 10 minutes walk
Mm.
from my house, and I couldn't matter how have I fallen this far that I
Yeah,
can't get myself
yeah,
and this tiny thing out the house. So,
yeah, it's crazy,
props to
isn't it?
you for managing.
Yeah, well, I remember thinking I've got to get out and meet people and do something
Mm,
and talk
yeah.
rubbish,
Because
generally avoiding talking about babies. But if the conversation went that way, fine. But drinking coffee and eating biscuits, well, it was just being, is
yes,
that whole, I guess maybe that's why I love that peer support thing, because I guess in some ways that's my first experience of it. And I guess it's interesting just thinking that through, that that I've gone on to to get involved with the peer support in terms of suicide bereavement. But I guess they are very similar. That help people going through the same thing, the lived experience is key, whether that's a positive or so say negative life experience. So yeah.
there is something. Yeah, you crave that sort of getting back to some sort of normality of a
Yeah,
tea and a biscuit. Because
yeah,
you've been through this, as you say, hit by a train
yeah,
moment, and it's totally thrown you off balance,
yeah.
and yeah, you just need something to anchor you.
And also that
Ellie,
people are in
yeah,
the same, sorry, I was just going to say that
yeah,
people are in the same situation. It's like, is it just me? Is it just me? But talking to other people,
mm,
it makes you think, it's that element of,
yes,
can be quite lonely being a new parent, a new
hugely
mum.
lonely.
So
Yeah.
I think that was also an element of it. That, is this also happening to you? Are you finding
Mm.
this? And ask these silly questions of, oh, has yours done this? And I didn't sweat that massively because I was quite free flow, but it was nice to know, I guess, maybe reassuring that other people were had challenges like me, which is
Definitely, I think
was helpful.
peer support, community,
Absolutely,
that's certainly the ethos of Beside Yourself and Mothers
absolutely.
Uncovered and lots of
Yeah,
other wonderful
yeah,
groups. It's just that connection with other
yeah.
people going
Connection.
through it
Yeah, and
to give you
talking, and yeah, yeah.
strength and community. Ellie, it's been so great talking to you. How give us your social so anyone listening knows how to reach
Socials.
you
So
for
yes, you can. So I'm Ellie Hatto. I'm on LinkedIn and also on Twitter/X. And the web address is besideyourself.org for Beside Yourself. And you can email me if you want to on, it's hello@besideyourself.org.
hello.
Hello.
So,
Hello.
as a little nod, so Mothers Uncovered operates using creativity to process experiences. So, as a little nod to that, in this podcast, we like our guests to finish with something that links to their motherhood journey in some way, a song, a poem, whatever. So, you have chosen a song, I believe. Would you like to tell us what it is and why you've chosen it?
Yep, I've chosen a song, and it is Forever in Blue Jeans by Neil Diamond. It was a song, resonates with me. My mum, I think it was my mum, must have bought it for me when I was 3, and it was in 1978. 1978, I just checked that date. So she was quite into music. She liked Neil Diamond. I also like Neil Diamond. this really reminds me of my mum. And I remember she probably was in the later stages of her life, and it mentions in the song about lying next to the fire. And I remember we used to lie on the floor together in front of the gas fire. And so it mentions that, and it just really resonates and makes me remember my mum. And just a message to all mums out there that, about their life being, wishing them all I guess, eternal life, forever in blue jeans, relaxed, being who they want to be, and going with the flow and being who they want to be.
That is a lovely message. I'm not familiar with the song, so I'm going to go and listen to it myself now. Thank you so much, Ellie, for sharing your story.
Thank you, Maggie. It's been great to talk to you.